we did the treatments, we did the neurofeedback, and her mental outlook completely changed. She was very, very optimistic, and she absolutely knew that her cancer was going to be completely gone. She went from worrying about her scans and thinking about, it's going to spread, to thinking about her scans in a way that she was excited about them. And she went in for a scan, and she was so happy about her scan, looking forward to it so much. She was actually doing a little dance, and they had to tell her stop moving. And she got her scan back last October, and there was no evidence of cancer anywhere in her body.
Welcome back to Ultra Life Today. I'm Josh Bell. You, this guy.
Adam Payne.
Yeah, and we've got Dr. Joshua Hersh. I know many of you are like joining us again for week number 2 because you're blown away by a story of a 3-year-old that they started doing neurofeedback with, who was probably labeled with cerebral palsy. And by the time he left the clinic the first time after one session, he was high-fiving his mom and reaching out and holding her hand. Behavior that hadn't been there before. This is Neurofeedback. This is Ultra Life Today. Dr. Joshua Hersh, Transformative Medicine in Utah. Really cool toolbox, Bastyr graduate, naturopathic guy. He's so inquisitive, and we love innovators, Adam. We love people that are pushing the envelope. We talked about neurofeedback and kind of what it was in the last episode. And, we're going to move on into this. How does the brain observe itself in real time through neurofeedback? How does it self-correct so quickly like that 3-year-old? And so, I read a little bit, Adam, it's like the whole EEG. NASA's been using neurofeedback for years and years and years, but we're kind of want to dial into the patient experience. What's actually happening, Joshua, during a neurofeedback session? Kind of sit in the patient seat for a second and let us know what their experience is, what you're doing, what this equipment is like, and what a typical session is like for a patient.
So it's actually pretty relaxing. So you sit in a chair. We have a recliner. You put an EEG on your head. A little bit of gel to make contact and get good signals. Takes about, 10 minutes or so to set up. And then the patient watches TV during a training. So we want their conscious brain relaxed, so their subconscious brain can pick up on the auditory feedback and the visual feedback, and then make the changes necessary. So.
Well, you said make the changes necessary. Now I'm like, what?
How?
What changes? What are they doing to cooperate with this process? Because I'm sitting back watching my favorite TV show and relaxing and laughing right now. How does this happen?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One way I can illustrate it is I had a 36-year-old male come to see me, 6 kids, high pressure sales job, super anxious, had been anxious for years and years and years. He was on 3 different medications for anxiety, and the medications would work for a little bit, but then stop working. He was in an experimental trial for a new medication, and same thing. Once he got it, it helped a little bit, but then it stopped working. When I met him, he was sleeping 2 hours a night at best. Some nights he couldn't sleep at all, and he was having up to 6 panic attacks a day. So
Wow.
one is debilitating, and then you have another and another and another. So it was making his life very, very challenging. And so we ran a lot of labs. We looked at neurotransmitters. We looked at what was causing some of the problems in his gut. We looked at his cortisol with rhythm with his adrenal function. And then I prescribed IVs, nutrient IVs, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, dietary changes, supplements, and neurofeedback. But by the end of 8 weeks of neurofeedback and the other treatments, he was sleeping 8 hours a night every night.
Brilliant.
What?
Panic attacks dropped by 95%, and his self-rated anxiety went from a 10 out of 10 to a 2 out of 10. So once
Wow.
again, changed his life. And what's really interesting about that, he would watch Criminal Minds, just really kind of dark stuff. And I wondered if this is gonna, he's watching this, he's getting really tense. It was gonna help him, but it helped him. Yeah. So you can even watch scary movies, and scary TV shows.
All right. So, but again, how is the patient cooperating with what is going on? They're hooked up to an EEG device on their head. They're sitting back, relaxing. What is are they cooperating in a way that they are doing something? What is the signal that's making them begin to think differently and form new neural pathways
Or are
in their
you
brain?
providing some sort of stimulus that then you're trying to get a response differently?
So with the neurofeedback with the EEG, it's receiving real-time information. So exactly what's happening in the brain, um, moment by moment. And it has a program. So we've taken the assessment using the sLORETA algorithms. It's actually processed by a supercomputer in Austria. So we can pinpoint where in the brain there's imbalances. Is there overexcitability in the prefrontal cortex? Are there problems with the anterior cingulate? Are there problems, processing information through the occipital lobe? And we can pinpoint those areas by telling the neurofeedback unit that we want to focus on these regions of interest where there's
Okay.
the greatest level of imbalance. And then as the patient is just sitting there watching TV and their brainwaves are doing their whatever they're doing, they'll hear clicks and chimes, auditory feedback, and they'll see the screen get brighter and dimmer, visual feedback, which will then signal to the brain that it's approaching their goals or reaching their goals. And it uses dynamic adjustments so that the patient's always reaching their goals about 60% of the time. And it'll make the goals harder to reach or easier to reach, and dynamically adjust to what the patient is doing that day. And that encourages the brain to keep trying. So you have your conscious brain, right? That's conscious of things we're focusing on. And then you have your subconscious brain that's always aware of its surroundings. So when you walk into a room, you make a 3D map of that room in your brain. When a person walks in, you make a 3D map of that person. And so the subconscious brain, part of what it does is trying to find a way to both survive and thrive in its environment. And it's picking up on social cues, it's picking up on auditory cues, visual cues, and it's trying to figure out a way to survive and thrive better. And so when it hears those clicks and chimes, it only takes seconds for that brain to figure out, okay, if I lower my alpha waves in my prefrontal cortex, I will hear those clicks and chimes more often. I'll see the screen get brighter. Even if a person's in a coma, they can do this type of subconscious processing. Yeah.
Okay, you said something at the end, and I'm just so blown away. Tell me if I'm interpreting this correct. Are you telling me that in a session that you're doing in neurofeedback, the subject is actually not consciously aware of what's taking place for their brain to make adjustments in the subconscious area? Is that right?
Right. That's true.
Wow.
And we use this for PTSD as well. And EMDR is helpful for PTSD. Neurofeedback is helpful. But with EMDR, you have to partially, if not completely, relive your trauma, which is difficult for the brain, difficult for the body. With neurofeedback, you don't have to relive it consciously. You just have to process it subconsciously and get the same results or similar results. Yeah.
Okay. You also shared with me that there's a company, and I'm wondering, because I went out and looked them up, do you utilize a product? Is your system with the algorithm and the EEG, is it a BrainMaster system? And my question is there a difference between what a clinician does with BrainMaster, and is it a much greater opportunity? Because there's all kinds of brain gadgets, as you know, out
Right.
there kind of trying to claim that they do this. But I'm talking to a guy, I mean, we're talking to a guy today, Adam, that's literally telling us about immediate results with individuals. So you use the BrainMaster, is that right? And is it a clinical version of that? Give us an idea of what you got going on there.
Right. There's a lot of different neurofeedback units out there. I prefer BrainMaster. and I have no financial ties to them at all, but except that I bought their equipment, so they don't pay me to show this. But Brainmaster uses a 24 up to a 24 lead EEG. And I like that better because then you can train the entire brain at the same time. Some clinicians use, one or two leads, and they do see results. But I think it's, in my experience, when you train the whole brain at the same time, especially using sLORETA algorithms, Z-score protocols, that's where I see the best results personally. Um, and you can do your homework. There's lots of other systems out there that do that. So I don't know if it's in my opinion, it's the best, but there may be other ones that are very similar too. So, well.
You've mentioned this gentleman with massive anxiety, panic attacks, digestive disorders, of which you created some lifestyle opportunities for him to change. And yet it sounds like the Brainmaster was a phenomenal portion of that. You talked about the young man with the cerebral palsy, the little 3-year-old guy. Have you noticed when you're doing different segments of your patient population, is there one segment that responds much greater to your neurofeedback, such as autoimmune or cancer or, mental depression, clinical bipolar type depression, that kind of thing? Or do you see it just literally working across the majority of each segment of your patient population?
So I'll run assessments on most of my patients to see where their brain is at. If there's imbalances, if it's overexcitatory, if there's inhibition in certain areas of the brain, and I encourage most of my patients to at least do an assessment and see where things are at, because there's a big connection between the brain, the ability to heal, the nervous system, and the immune system. But for example, I had um, a female patient, 32 years old. She had triple negative breast cancer, and she did chemotherapy, mastectomy, radiation, immunotherapy, and then she did some natural therapies like high-dose vitamin C and hyperbaric oxygen therapy, some supplements, some dietary changes, and her cancer went away. No evidence of cancer. But then she'd
Wow.
lay in bed and worry about it coming back, super
Ugh.
anxious, and she would play this story in her mind of her dying and her kids growing up without a mom, and it was just like consuming her mental life. And so we started, and then I didn't see her for a few months, and then she calls me and says my cancer's back, and
Hmm.
yeah, and so we're like, we need to do something to address your mental health. So we did, IVs, we did dietary changes, we did IV resveratrol, and we did neurofeedback. And she went from laying in bed worrying about her cancer coming back to laying in bed thinking about her cancer disappearing and having a wonderful life with her kids. And
Wow.
by this point, it spread to her lymph nodes in her neck, spread to her liver, and spread to her groin. And we did the treatments, we did the neurofeedback, and her mental outlook completely changed. She was very, very optimistic, and she absolutely knew that her cancer was going to be completely gone. She went from worrying about her scans and thinking about, it's going to spread, to thinking about her scans in a way that she was excited about them. And she went in for a scan, and she was
Wow.
so happy about her scan and looking forward to it so much. She was actually doing a little dance, and they had to tell her stop moving. And she got her scan back last October, and there was no evidence of cancer anywhere in her body. Gone,
Yeah.
completely gone.
And through what you did through neurofeedback, now she doesn't have an expectation of that coming back. She's seeing herself as a whole person, well, complete, transformed, transformative
Right.
medicine. Amazing.
Yeah.
So Doc, I'm curious when you without breaking confidentiality, when you did the initial brain scan on that patient, did you see in her topology were there areas that had lower than normal activity in her brain waves?
It was actually just the opposite. It was higher than normal activity, so very, very excitatory. So when we get a neurofeedback assessment back, it'll put things in what they call voxels, or three-dimensional standard deviations, and we can see if there's, you know, 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviations, or 3 standard deviations, either above or below the norm. And for her, it was 3 standard deviations above the norm. So her brain was very, very excitatory. Very, very anxious.
Way too triggered, I guess, in many ways.
Exactly.
So maybe I'm reading between the lines because I asked the question, segments of your patient population. I think you may have answered the question with the last story, but you see neurofeedback as being beneficial pretty much in any category of a patient, don't you?
You know, there's cases where we don't consider neurofeedback, but for chronic debilitating disease and chronic disease in general, I think it can be very beneficial. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You have been listening to Dr. Joshua Hersh, Utah Transformative Medicine. Adam, what are you doing this weekend? Can we get a cheap flight? Because I'm wanting to go hang out with this guy. It's pretty amazing. You know, we've talked about some really brilliant use case scenarios out of this man's own clinic, transformative-medicine.com. He'll do an initial consultation even remotely. He does have people that travel out to Utah. Great place to go. If you have to go see a guy to get well, Utah is the place to go. It's absolutely beautiful out there. We're coming back to do a final episode, another conversation with Dr. Joshua Hersh. Adam, we are going to have him back again because I bet he's got a lot of other interesting things that he does as well, right? But we got one more. We got one more conversation.
We've only pulled out the top tray of the toolbox here.
I think so as well. Yeah, but neurofeedback, it's training the brain rather than overriding the brain. I mean, a computer term would be you're actually overriding the way your brain is working. In a way, it's like you're putting a new program in there, which I think is absolutely brilliant. You know, when we go into our next conversation with Joshua Hersh, final episode, we're going to focus even a little more. I want to hear more real-world outcomes. And then I want to know what other doctors are doing. Are other people adopting this too in your world? Function med is this. Adam, you and I have been at a bunch of conferences the last few years, and you know the number one thing I heard as we would get in the rooms and the breakout sessions and things with doctors? It was this. Every single doctor that I've been around for the last 5 years said, we'd been ignoring the mental, emotional, and spiritual component of these individuals' lives. And when we begin to include that, people that weren't getting well are getting well now. And this is a huge component of that.
I think you're right.
Yeah, well, Dr. Joshua Hersh is going to be back for conversation number 3. Ultralife Today. Do you like us? Subscribe, share, and also you can get us wherever you find podcasts. We'll see you again next time with Dr. Joshua Hersh, part 3.
Thanks. See you soon.